Okay, Ron. So in this series, we've talked a lot at a high level about the formation of your company, Tacilent, about the reset platform. Now it's time for us to start diving a little deeper, lifting the hood up, trying to understand kind of like what makes your organization different than others. So I'd like to focus today's conversation on the concept of trust and credibility. Right now, it seems every company has an AI offering. Most of these places, especially like in the big data world, you go in, you create an account, you just start dumping all your personal information in. I know that scares a lot of people. So I understand, again, trust and transparency, very important to you when you were forming this company, building out your solution. Can you talk to me a little bit about how your team thinks about that topic?
Yeah, so we really start differently from the foundation. So when we're looking at what fuels like AI solutions or AI tools out there in market right now, it's really driven on everyone knows large language models or starting to learn about small language models. But even behind that, there's data. So data is that new gold that everyone's talking about. And so when you look at how these language models are built, right now the large ones are built on stolen IP, whether it's I say stolen, but really it's unwittingly like the use of your intellectual property. Even right now, on you look at LinkedIn, there's been a lot of articles about how LinkedIn is using everything that you post to train models. So for us, we look at it like how do we actually build credibility and trust, and how do we actually go back to our core principles, but then also just like who we are as an organization, right? Like I spent my entire career validating and giving credibility to data points to be able to withstand scrutiny, whether that's from Congress or the public opinion, you name it, right? But also to save lives. And so taking that level of extreme to how we build data. So looking at for us, it's really built on where's the data coming from? Like we want to know and be able to articulate to our clients, like, hey, these are the data points we use. These are the experts that we pull that information from. And so going back to the name of the company, so it's called Tacilent for a reason. So that Tacilent piece, so it's tacit and resilient. So tacit knowledge transfer from those experts in industry, from academia, from those credible sources that are out there, and then validating it through a process that's tied back to some national security principles.
Okay. So I guess when you structure your team, obviously there's that sort of oath I would imagine that folks are taking to be responsible and be ethical. How are you aligning both the technology and the people in furtherance of that mission that you talk about? Do you have guiding principles or core
Yeah.
philosophy, or just how are you operationalizing that?
Yeah, so from a foundational standpoint, like I'm really big on making sure that as like we can scale, and when everyone comes in, it's like you understand what our values are, right? So there's the core values of the business, which we could talk about more, but really what I want to focus on is more so the seven core principles for us as part of responsible AI. So when you look at what's out there, it's like everyone's like, what does that actually mean? Like some people say, like, oh, that's ethical AI. It's like, well, ethics is a part of it, but for us, it's really starting with like, what is that stair stepping process for us to always have our developers, our programmers, our engineers, our data scientists, down to our analysts, to the sales team and beyond, to be able to understand like, hey, what is it that we do that's differently, right? So, a responsible AI company for us is really built on seven principles. And the first part is what we were discussing before, which is around data, right? So, understanding data security, data governance, which is really why we're purposeful about how we institute those. But then also, we always come back to that as we're developing and refining our solutions.
Okay, so we start there. What does that then lead to in terms of you talk about stair stepping? I find this interesting because usually it's just a boilerplate mission statement on somebody's website, but like
Yeah.
help me understand. Like you even said something, ethics is a subset.
Hmm.
I never really thought about it. I thought it was sort of a standalone onto itself. So
Yeah.
walk me through then, if you would, like what are those stair steps that begin to pull in all these other important components?
Right. So as we mentioned, like understanding, like starting with data security, data governance, and then privacy, right? Like so everyone going back to what is happening right now in industry where it's like, hey, these models are built on stolen intellectual property or is unwittingly, right? Like so it's just like those so many data points, then you don't really know how those decisions are being made in those algorithms. You can't really validate the output, but you and I can like a lot of people are actually validating the output when it's like, hey, this isn't really if I take it for what it is, face value, it might work for some people. But for me, like I can't even out of all of the models that I play around with and using from their chatbot like approach, like that doesn't work for me to go and take that directly to LinkedIn to do a post, right? Like and when we talk to a level of complexity or the subject matter expertise needed to get that high quality output. So for us, as I mentioned, like data, privacy, data governance, data security, and privacy is what we start with. But the next one really is around understanding and mitigating bias. And so that's where you get into the ethics piece. And so for me, that's one of the things I've been doing throughout my entire career. So, like, in order to produce intelligence within the FBI or in the military, you have to understand your own personal biases, but then those biases of the team. And then what are the techniques you're going to use to overcome those, right? So, how do you inject objectivity to where, like, hey, you can't be leaning to one political view or leaning to this bias or whatever it is, you have to put those out on the table. And so one of the things that we talk about in our principles is really around using some of those analytical tradecraft techniques around like how you develop intelligence, right? Objectivity. So whether that's some of the things we're familiar with, red teaming, devil's advocate, and then there's some other ones that get a little bit more advanced that take some time. And so we're purposeful about how we do that within the team, whether it's purposeful when I say like, hey, we're going to do red teaming right now, or if it's just challenging each other and having that open communication to where it's like, hey, we need to be aware of these challenges that exist as we develop our solutions.